This is BD World. I'm SYED and you're watching Fault Lines. Pakistan's political landscape is abuzz these days with a lot of economic terminologies. It has been realized by the leadership of the country that economics needs to sit at the heart of political decision making. And in order to do this efficiently, there is a dire need of consistency of policies. This is what the Prime Minister calls the Charter of Economy, which he wants to sign with the opposition party, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, and he has offered this openly to the chairman of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, Mr. Imran Khan, to come forward with his economic team and discuss what exact policies are required for Pakistan's economic success. Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, SYED, has published a research paper back in July 2022, before this term was made public by the government, wherein they have identified what exactly needs to be done in their valued opinion, in their worthy opinion, to mainstream Pakistan's economy and to dissect the economy and to segregate it from the mainstream politics. Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my first guest to the program.
Pakistan has experienced at least 12 episodes of balance of payments stress and outright economic crisis since 1988. Pakistan is experiencing yet another challenging situation, a multi-pronged economic crisis that ticks many boxes and is unprecedented in its severity as well as complexity. Foreign exchange reserves held by the State Bank of Pakistan fell another $555 million, clocking in at an alarming level of $7.83 billion. The low level of reserves has put the currency under pressure, with the rupee hitting its all-time low in the interbank market last month. The United Nations Development Programme has said that Pakistan is currently facing a challenging economic situation with debt in excess of 50 trillion rupees. $250 billion. The reform process can begin within a long-term economic governance framework committed to by the political parties. Loans, deferred payments, lowering currency value, and other short-term measures can give temporary relief, but it is not the answer to Pakistan's economic woes. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has periodically offered a charter of the economy to put the country on the path of economic sovereignty and continuation of its journey in the right direction. The charter of economy should delink political issues from economic affairs as much as possible, and it should be signed by all political parties to assure sustainable economic development.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm joined by Mr. Saddam Hussain. He is research economist at Pakistan Institute of Development Economics and also the co-author of the paper named Charter of Economy, published by SYED in 2022. Saddam, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much, SHABAHAT, for inviting me to the Fault Lines program. Always happy to be here.
First things first, Saddam, why do we need a Charter of Economy to begin with?
Economic growth is at the pivot and it is a solution to all the ills of Pakistan, the economic issues of Pakistan. So we believe that Pakistan has to grow 6 to 9% consistently over the few years to mitigate all the economic issues of the country. Now, how it will grow, it needs a change in the rules of the games, because there is a social order. We have to understand the social order of the country. Across the world, there are two kinds of social orders, limited access order and open access order. As the name suggests, limited access order is where limited class or privileged class have opportunities, and on the other hand, open access order is the social construction where everybody has equal opportunities. So to transition from limited access to open access order, we have to change rules of the games so that everybody can avail opportunities, grow and contribute to the economy of the country.
You have mentioned growth, the economic growth of Pakistan, to be a major concern. You have mentioned that the inconsistency in growth is a major reason why we could not make any substantial economic progress. Your thoughts on it?
Charter of the economy, the basic framework behind this charter of the economy is that the political parties across the country, they have to agree on some principles that the politics should not negatively impact the economy. So as you know, the politics cannot be de-linked with the economics, but there has to be some principle stance. For that we authored the Charter of Economy. We have chalked out a roadmap where these are the points where there should be no intervention or no influence from the political parties and from the government. So as you would read, we suggested some measures, for example, independent planning commission. And why we suggested that? Just because for the consistency. Because when the new government comes and they have their own roadmap and they roll back the previous government plans, so it caused a lot of inconsistency and uncertainty, which is bad for the business and economic activity. So to plug in the consistency, we need some measures like independent planning commission, the growth commission, which work independently, so that they have a long-term plan of the growth. Similarly, independent planning commission, they should have a long-term plan, so it won't be affected by the change of the government or change of the party at the upper level.
Now let's get down to some deep business. In the paper you have mentioned that Pakistan requires to have an independent debt agency, an independent planning commission, independent growth commission to monitor the growth of the country, to segregate all the authorities and to make them independent of the mainstream governance. What is left for the politicians in this country?
Mr. Shabad, I guess we have very much, we very much included this idea that what will the politicians do, because they are the representative of the people. So what we suggest that independent growth commission, independent debt agency and the budget unit, they would function as independent bodies consisted of experts who would have informed viewpoint and informed frameworks and informed plans for the future based on economic rationale and other research with other research inputs. But that has to be checked and balanced by the politicians. So if you have read our Charter of Economy, we have suggested at the end that these plans should be presented at on the floor of the parliament to scrutinize by the politicians, to be debated over by the politicians, and then they would have a final nod. But at least they would have an informed roadmap, and then they can debate on that, and then they can have a final nod and they have green signal.
Education and skill development sits at the center of your research paper. The research paper believes that there has to be a more consistent focus on education instead of brick and mortar. How do you qualify this argument?
True. Our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Nadeem, has this idea. He came up with this idea a few years back that brick and mortar should go and we should invest in software. As you mentioned that we have done a lot in education, but that is the quantitative part, whereas the qualitative part is being compromised. I interview people, I've seen people, they have higher degrees, MPhil and PhDs, but they don't know how to present their viewpoint. So, but here in Charter of Economy, we are talking about technical skills, technical education. We need electricians, we need, the experts. They can, for example, engineering. One is the whole engineering, the subject. Then there are some smaller parts of it. So we need technicians. For example, one of my friend was telling me that the Chinese were building some storehouse up in GB and they wanted to make in few weeks, but when they asked the local laborers, they were not able to do that. Then when they brought the machines, the local the people of Pakistan, they don't know how to use those machines. So the Chinese brought their own skilled labor to use those machines and to construct that building. So here my point is that things like CPEC and economic growth, we talk about Central Asia and the miracle Central Asia has done. It was all because their people were educated in technical skills, and when the opportunity came, they just plugged in and reaped the benefits. I would just extend this to another thing, that CPEC, for example, is the biggest opportunity at the time. CPEC should not be considered as a notch from heaven. We have seen that the British Railways, the most ambitious project in Indian subcontinent, failed because we could not maintain it, we could not manage it. Similar would happen if the CPEC come and our people don't plug in, and if the labor from outside comes in. So we need to prepare our labor force for the future if we have to grow economically, because there's supply and demand. So if we grow economically, our industries grow, and when CPEC comes and become operational, so we should have a workforce ready for that.
But the people of the country have remained poor despite significant progress made by the sugar industry, by the textile industry, by the automobile industry, to name a few, by the cement industry, which has done wonders. We have seen that very little impact has come even to the people working in this industry when we talk about the bottom class. Rather, it has been the cartels that are haunting Pakistan's economy to this day. What do you say?
It's a long debate, but I would say that, when I say the politics from economic side, just certainly means that these industries, for example, wheat and sugar and agriculture, there's a larger footprint of the government. So when the government has a larger footprint and the government officials are involved and the government machinery is involved, so there's a behavior of rent seeking and all that. I don't want to go into the detail, you know better. So we are suggesting that government should minimize its footprint, let the market work and the market forces, then it will trickle down. As far as industrialization is concerned, there has been an inconsistency and in policies. I have traveled across the country and met industrialists for some projects, and they were just saying that we have one demand from the government: consistency in policies, so then they can grow. So when there's consistency in policies, industrialization grow, there's more output, more productivity, and we export more goods and we have more foreign exchange. So that's how there's a trickle down effect on the economy. But we cannot, because we are just on the verge of industrialization. So we have a stagnant output, so that we can just keep breathing on. So, but we didn't saw the expansion of the industrial base at the full potential, and that's why you don't see a trickle down effect.
Saddam, the paper believes that there has to be a segregation between the politics and economics. Is there any example around us where politics has been completely segregated from the economics of the country?
Politics cannot be dealing from the economics completely, but what we mean here is that the negative impact of the politics should not influence the economy. I would just give you the biggest example of the US and China. They are at the daggers drawn at each other, and the animosity is growing, and the recent visit of the American officials. But their trade volume, bilateral trade volume, is 615 billion. So again, the US-India, the China and India in 2020, they had 88 billion of trade volume, and now it has grown by 1/3. So it's now around 115 billion. So there is the politics involved, the political issues are there, but they are not letting this politics impact their economic side. Similarly, if you see the countries in US, in India and Australia and other countries, the developing countries, the governments come and go. There's a change of the foreign policy and the economic policy overall at the aggregate level. You prefer some sectors and put some on the back burner, but the basic fundamental economic engine remains the same. There's no harm on industry, no harm on health and the education. So the fundamentals of the economy are still there. So this is what we mean. The politicians have every right to, as a representative of people, that they should have a broader framework, but the fundamentals should be there.
Now, according to your paper, the gap between imports and export is a real problem. What do you suggest to arrest this issue? How would you ensure Pakistan's export industry to grow further?
Exactly. If you see the overall theme in this charter economy is to increase the productivity, and to increase the productivity we have chalked out all this roadmap. I would simply say that we need to deregulate. For example, if there's had to come for investment, so he won't come because there are NOCs, there are attestations, and there are other certificates and security clearance and other things. So when the cost of transaction gets higher and higher, so why would investors come in our country? So deregulate. There should be minimum regulation, but we should get done with excessive regulation. simplify the procedures, plug in one window operations, and facilitate the businesses and the economic activity. And it is the white elephant, the state-owned enterprises, which we cannot handle and they are in loss and we are giving bailout packages. We should privatize them, or at least give the management to the private sector. So this is how the productivity overall would increase.
Saddam, the paper also says that the energy market has to be made independent, has to be less regulated. You also pointed out that the energy metering has to be prepaid instead of being postpaid, which will cut down the losses. Has there been a specific study in this case? Because all mentioned here is just a glimpse of an overall report. So is there a detailed paper available for it?
Our own Dr. Afia Malik at PIDE have written extensively on this. You can check our website pid.org.pk and search the name of Dr. Afia Malik. She's consistently been writing on energy issues, and she has given some roadmaps and some mechanisms and how it should be decentralized and how we can privatize the energy supply companies, and how we should implement the prepaid meters and how it affects. So you can check our website. I have read from those. So these are the references.
Why don't you bring the stalwart politicians that are dictating their economic policies to their respective parties to the table and help to bridge the gap in the political landscape of the country?
Actually, what we are doing, we are playing as a bridge. We are just creating awareness. We are generating the debate around the issues, because most of the people don't know what is the roadmap. If there's an issue, how we can tackle it. So the PIDE fills in the gap. We are doing webinars, and we are doing short videos and even animated videos in Urdu and English both. So we are generating a debate across the country. So when the government comes, it has the priority areas, few areas on the agenda, and other comes later. So to bring more agenda items into those issues, we have to keep knocking on the door of the government. So to keep knocking, there should be first debate, and there should be demand from the people. As you would know that the issues of transgender and environment and such things come on the agenda of the government because there was a demand for people, and where this demand came from, because the civil society and academia generated a debate on it. So this is exactly what we are doing. And this charter of economy is kind of a zero draft, or which can be improved, and all are invited to give more inputs, and it can be refined.
Thank you very much, Saddam, for being guest in our program. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join you back with the second segment of the program. Stay with us. Welcome back. Ladies and gentlemen, the largest crisis of our times is the crisis of Syria. This is a conflict that has widely remained underreported. 6.4 million people are displaced out of Syria. More than 6.4 million people are displaced within Syria. Cities after cities have been destroyed in a war that has been ignited from all the corners. The involvement of international actors have remained pretty evident. But this time there have been some positive developments. Turkey has come forward to shake hand with Syria to overcome all the problems that they had between the two sides, and many believe President Putin is playing a role in that. To talk about this, I have today invited Brigadier Retired Rashid Wali Jajua in my program. He is president of IPRI, a famous think tank in Islamabad. Brigadier Rashid Wali Jajua, I welcome you to the program.
Thank you very much.
So what's the latest situation in Syria at the moment?
Yes, at the moment, we all know that the Syrian government led by Bashar al-Assad is in control of all the major urban cities, minus the Idlib region. And most of the rural space is still contested. And there are pockets where Syrian rebels and PKK elements, plus there are other groups, rebel groups. Those are still in control of those spaces. And if you go towards the north and the northeast, and which abuts Turkish territory, there still SDF is controlling most of the areas, and there are areas on the east in the Afrin side where still there's a pocket of rebel elements affiliated to Turkish government, and some elements of Arab militias. They're also in control. Then if you move in the center, Ras Al Ain and Kobain area, that is also inhabited by Arab militias and those elements which are affiliated to Turkish military. And if we go further east to the Kamshili side, there are some pockets which are in the hands of Turkish-controlled militia, but SDF, that is the Syrian Democratic Forces, so they are holding this sliver of around 400 kilometers from Kamshili to Afrin, and there are mostly PKK's affiliate YPG, the Kurdish militia, which has forged a linkage with Syrian Democratic Forces. So mostly led by YPJ, SDF is in sway. And we also know that once the Americans left, then the Syrian government also decided to send its troops. So there was a kind of agreement amongst the SDF, which was earlier opposing the Syrian forces, that the Syrian forces could come and try and evict the pockets which are in control of the Turkish affiliated militias from the Syrian territory. So this is the big mosaic, and the situation is still not very stable, as 6.8 million are still refugees and 6.8 million are internally displaced, and they are scattered into the camps. And in the region of Idlib, there are camps, the region of Kobain, there are Arab militias which are now which are receiving elements from IS ex-fighters. They are into their settlements. So it's a very still unstable and a very complicated mosaic in Syria.
Rashid Saab, there have been a rough patch between the diplomatic relationship of the two sides. I mean, the Turkey and Syrian sides have not been enjoying a good relationship since 2009, and before 2008 it was certainly a different situation.
We all know that when this whole Syrian conflict started in 2011, Turkey initially it was opposing the Bashar al-Assad government, but we also know that it did not allow Americans to use its airspace for air attacks once the Americans came and got involved into this conflict. Turkey at this point of time is its most pressing concern is the security of its territory, and the threat that they envisage is from the PKK affiliates, because PKK is active in northern Iraq also, where there is a Kurdistan independent region, and from there these groups of the Kurdish militias and their affiliates, they get sustenance from each other. So that's the sensitivity, that has been the sensitivity of Turkey all along. And between 2016 and 19, the Turkish government, which was led by Erdogan, and he was a strong man, and he wanted to be, known as a strong nationalist leader who could not allow any encroachment on his territory. So his Kurdish policy was very, very aggressive, and we saw 3 offensives, 2016, 17, 18, and the latest in 20, in which there were a lot of resettlements, there were a lot of internal displacements, and there was a resistance by Americans which did not look favorably upon the Turkish forays into this Syrian territory, because they always thought PKK was their ally against ISIL, and also a bulwark against expansion of the government forces. Yes, I tend to agree here that there is some thaw, and it's in fact the continuation of an old process which started with the Astana process, where Iran, Russia, and Turkey, they sat down together to find a way out of this morass in Syria, and especially this Ukrainian conflict and the Turkey's role in the Ukrainian conflict, wherein it has played the role of a balancer, and it has negotiated a grain deal also to provide a corridor for export of grain to the world from the Russian Black Sea ports. So this also is seen by Russia as a kind of a supportive role by Turkey, or a positive role. And keeping that in mind, Russia is in fact interested that Turkey should remain on board as far as the further destabilization of the conflict in Syria is concerned. So this meeting of the foreign ministers has probably yielded some kind of a space for the Bashar al-Assad's government to, go back from its maximalist positions and to sever its linkages from SDF and give some kind of space to Turkey to ensure that those disparate refractory groups of Kurds, PKK in Iraq and YPG here, do not coalesce together and present a potent threat both to the Syria itself, and we all know that the Kurds were the most suppressed community prior to the war. The war changed the entire dynamics, and also it should satisfy the security concerns of Turkey. So I think there is a thaw and there is a wink from Syria to Turkey.
But Janjua Saab, Turkey has been supporting the rebels that were fighting against the Assad regime. Now, if Turkey is going to normalize the relationship with Syria's administration or Syria's government, will these rebels not come and haunt back the Turkish side? That has happened in the past with several other countries as well.
It will to an extent, and especially the Syrian Democratic Front, which was earlier the opposition, and it was tacitly being supported. But now the dynamics have entirely changed because of the big changes at the geopolitical level. And I think Turkey would have factored in this opposition and the changed attitude of the opposition vis-a-vis Turkey into its calculation while taking this decision. And there are forces, Arab militias especially, and there are some government forces of erstwhile Syrian army which are still allied strongly with Turkey, and Turkey is making a common cause with them. And if in any case, if a ground offensive is launched just like 2020 to clear some spaces of the presence of YPG militia and the Syrian Democratic Front, I think the forces which are from the erstwhile Syrian army, loyal to the Turkish forces, they would play an important part. And Turkey could play off one faction against another, and once the Syrian government is also laid off, those opposition groups would not be a very potent threat because the action against YPG is the most important action. And if the YPG's power is broken or their presence is atomized and there is some resettlement of the refugees of the Arab militias, I think those people, they can go back to their areas and their districts from where they were evicted. And I think that could usher a fair measure of stability.
So what will be the fate of Syrian area under control of Turkish forces if all goes well from here?
You see, it's all a function of the complete control of the Syrian regime over its entire territory. We've seen in Iraq, there is a virtually independent Kurdistan region, and that region is not under de facto authority of the central government as well. Same as the situation here. Still, the Syrian government is not in control of its entire territory. Until the time that happens, a certain loss of territory might be construed as a temporary loss, and the stability that it ensures might be a bigger incentive for Bashar al-Assad's government, rather than stretching itself too thin, trying to fight small incursions. And obviously, it would be with the concurrence of international community, the major stakeholders like Russia also, and the Turkish concerns about the buffer zone does not make that buffer zone a territory of Turkey. So it doesn't have an irredentist claim as such, but it would remain a kind of a safe zone, a de facto safe zone that Turkey always aspired, till the time complete peace returns, a stable government takes form, and then there are bilateral negotiations in which those spaces could be perhaps vacated once the Syrian government gives complete guarantee that those would not be filled in by the Kurd militia again.
Janjua Saab, 3.5 million Syrians are living in Turkey today. Don't you believe it is one of the major reasons why President Tayyip Erdogan is coming forward to sort out this issue? Isn't economic pressure sitting at the heart of this decision that he has made?
Yes, I've earlier mentioned it is one of the important drivers of this desire to depopulate or to sanitize and to make that buffer zone safe, so that out of those 3.6, at least 2 million could be resettled, and the pressure is lifted off Turkey to host such a large refugee population. This is one of the motivations. I agree with you.
Thank you very much, Rashid Wali Janjua Saab, for being guest in our program.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the problems of Syria are not over, but at least the state of Syria is in a positive direction. There is at least a bit of halt in the violence. Let's all hope that the war of Syria comes to an end and Syria is rebuilt once again to perfect peace and harmony. We'll join you next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.